have visibility to the slides. We are recording this session. Yep, I can see. Thank you, Nicole, for letting us know that you can see the slides.
Great.
We will be recording the session in the event that you aren't able to see this information, and or if for some reason you're need to leave early or check out, we'll still have this available to you. Welcome. I'm Teresa. This is Karen. We'll get into a little bit more of the introductions as we go forward. But for the purposes of this call, it's really a primer prior to the session. And we will absolutely have plenty of time when you come in for the instructor-led component to go through introductions, introduce yourselves to each other, get a sense of each other's backgrounds, and really start to come together as a cohort group. So we'll hold off on the individual introductions for the people on the call until you're here in person. So with that, okay. So with that, as you can see, the dancing squares to keep you alert here for the morning, our session is going to really be about making certain people actively participate. It's not just the Karen Teresa show. It's really about all of you participating as cohorts, making certain that we learn each other's best practices and we share them, making certain that we really want to be able to learn from each other, as well as keep this a very positive and professional, constructive engagement and way of discussing things. And of course, because we're all learning things that are new and potentially discussing opportunities to work with possibly challenging employees or challenging situations, let's make certain that we keep these conversations confidential. For those of you who can relate to this, it's Vegas rules. So we want to make certain that as well, if there's anything in particular you're not comfortable sharing with the group and still need some coaching or guidance, feel free to reach out to Karen or myself individually and we'll work with you on that particular issue. So for this session, here's our roadmap ahead. Off in the far distance, you can't see the destination. It's not a road to nowhere. We actually do have a specific map. And we have some people joining us late. Welcome aboard, everyone. So for us,
thank you.
For today's session, we're going to give you a very high-level overview to the program. We're going to specifically reinforce what you did in your pre-work, which is go over a little bit about the DISC model and understanding of the styles and their descriptors. And then the emphasis is really going to be around understanding that we need to adapt our communication to different people and that are using different styles, and be sensitive and aware of what might be around those other styles so that we can adjust accordingly. And then as a result, that means we need to coach differently. We need to use different skills, different styles in order to best relate to other people because they have different preferences and different styles as well. And the goal of coaching is to create that bonding, trusting relationship so that you can work together collaboratively. All right, so here's the brief overview, and hopefully none of this is a surprise to all of you since you've enrolled in the program and this is what you signed up for. As we said, this is Karen and I'm Teresa, and we'll be your coaching guides as we go through this together. We want to make certain that you are aware that this is the 1 hour webinar that we are working on right now. I'm putting my cursor over that particular item. Then you'll be coming in for the instructor-led session, which is 4 hours. And then there are follow-up webinars. They're each 1 hour. They're not 4-hour webinars. They're 4 individual webinars, and they're each about an hour in duration. This is really an opportunity for us to work as a cohort. And for many of you, it's really about being able to reinforce, hopefully you've heard this before, training alone doesn't work. It's that reinforcement, recognition, and application back in the real world that really makes this become a habit, a routine, and really makes you more proficient. So that's why we want to make certain we have these follow-up webinars to make certain that we're having opportunities to apply to the real world and get constructive feedback and support from each other. We will be going through the self-awareness and coaching skills and coaching in real time throughout the session. And yes, everybody get excited. You will be awarded 5 CEUs upon successful completion of all the components. For those of you who are possibly new, please note that the instructor-led training program will be conducted here at 1450 Frazee. Come to the 5th floor and sign in with the receptionist, and you'll see signs pointing you in the right direction for the room 501. And we do have free parking, but come early because we have a little bit of construction going on, so you want to get a premier spot. All of the follow-up sessions will be from 10 to 11 on the dates indicated, and you will be receiving follow-up Outlook email indicators. And because of the size of the group, we want to make certain we give you as much time and focused attention and opportunity to discuss things on the call. So we'll be splitting up the group into 2 cohorts, so that half the group will be working with Karen, half will be working with myself, in order to make certain you have as much airtime as possible. That being said, we're now going to go into the DISC component, which is really reviewing what you had for pre-work prior to this session. So thank you all for completing the pre-work before this particular session today. We really want to make certain that the core of DISC and what we have as an objective for this pre-work is to really use this as a tool and a model and a resource that allows us to enhance our leadership effectiveness. It also makes us a little bit more aware of other people's behavioral tendencies. These are trends, these are things that you can take into consideration so that when you're engaging in a situation, you can interpret and understand what might be going on in order to best communicate. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough and a frog, so I apologize. This is an opportunity to use this model and use this lessons learned around not only how to better communicate with others, to make certain you're aware of your communication style and its impact on other people, but it's also a useful tool to have one more piece of information to understand, respect, and value, appreciate other people's differences and other people's preferences. Doesn't make them right or wrong, they're just differences, and we need to be able to understand them so we can adapt, meet each other halfway, and best work with each other. That being said, we want to make certain that folks realize that this DISC model, this DISC approach has been around forever. You can tell by the black and white pictures. They've been around forever. I was both familiar with DISC almost 30 years ago at the beginning of my career, and as well as esteemed professors from top tier schools, and even more importantly in terms of how long it's been around and where it's came from, the Harvard backgrounds, et cetera. More important than that is that whether it's a Fortune 50 organization or a family-owned business, this has been a useful tool that's used globally as well as across different industries and different types of organizations. It really has stood the test of time. It's not a massive personality assessment, psychological assessment. I don't want to overinflate it, but I definitely want to give it the gravitas that it deserves and be robust, usable, applicable, and has been recognized as such for many, many years. With that, I did allude to this a little bit, just to make certain we're all on the same page. DISC is not used to assess people's character, their values. It's not to be an indicator of what a person's background, experience, level of education. It's not an IQ evaluation or an EQ evaluation. And it doesn't say anything about a person's effectiveness. It's really about understanding someone's styles, preferences, not needs. It really shows, I use the word preferences versus needs in terms of, isn't what drives and motivates from a need perspective, but it is around need when I say the word preferences. And then it's communication styles. And remember, everyone has the ability and the muscle of each one of these styles. We just might have certain tendencies, one or the other, and certain tendencies might show up in particular situations. But everybody has the capacity to use all of the different styles. It's just about being able to recognize them and maybe work that muscle a little bit that you might not be using as a preference or something that you tend to lead with and as your go-to style. But this is an opportunity as we use the model to become proficient at all 4 of those muscles. That being said, we have the opportunity of the disc elevator, so to speak, and making certain it goes to every single floor, and we're able to recognize how that works. And continuing that elevator metaphor, we're looking at if someone is coming from a strong preference around the dominant style for D, you might hear this person move quickly or hear them move quickly. You might hear them say, oh, close the door as soon as they get into the elevator, because they're very focused on getting where they need to go, using very quick language, very brief and abbreviated. It doesn't mean anything other than that's how they're communicating. They're moving, they're determined, they want to get to the results and move forward. Don't read into anything other than that. Someone who's definitely coming from and has a strong tendency towards influencing, or the I, is someone's like, hey, don't worry, we'll wait for you, and is very animated and keeps the door open and has that kind of energy around them. Those who come with traditionally or emphasizing from the steady or S, those others were maybe a little bit quieter, but they're very conscientious of other people and the fact that other folks need to get into the elevator. They may even let them go in first. And because of that awareness of building relationships and trust and safety, they would move back into the corner to allow for everybody else on the elevator to have the proper space. Now, those that are coming from the preference or the style around the conscientious or RC, whoops, go the other direction, looking at the video. What they're going to be doing is they're looking at all the data points. So as they're coming into the elevator, they're not, and don't take this personally, they're not saying, hey, look at how much Karen and Teresa weigh. They're actually being able to look at all the data, and they're assessing all the information. Here's where the fire alarm is. Here's where the maximum weight is. Here's what's going on. If the elevator's too full, I might be taking that as a process of data, and I might get off and take the stairs because I'm just looking at it as being very mindful of all the data points and all the attention to detail. So it's a slightly humorous way of looking at things, but we'll definitely get into more information, and just want to make certain that we followed along with our little elevator story. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
All right. And I love it. I'm seeing in the chat it looks like you all have used Zoom before, or if you haven't, you've figured out the chat. So that's fabulous. This, as we said, is interactive. So encourage you to come off mute. We're going to get rolling here, and also use the chat. There was a question from Richard about if you're going to get a copy of the slides. Absolutely. We'll send those out to you. So if you haven't used Zoom before, we're going to do something fun. It's a poll, pretty self-explanatory. So even if you're on your phone, you can use this. So basically, I'm going to launch a poll about your disc style. So I'm going to put it up here. So when it shows, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and click on the one style that you are most dominant in. So when you took the assessment, you probably had a number that was higher in either dominant, influencing, steady, or conscientious. So we'll just get a sense here of what the cohort is made up of. Kind of fun to see, so we'll keep it open a little bit more. See, a couple of you have answered, a few of you still waiting for some others. So go ahead, just take a couple minutes there. Was anyone not able to take the assessment? Either come off mute or write in the chat. Okay. All right, we'll give it a couple more seconds. We'll give it a whole minute. So we're coming up on 5 seconds here, and then I will show you the results of the poll. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll now. Well done. And I'm going to share the results so you can see what your cohort is made of. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So it looks like our dominant. It looks like we've got a mix of everyone, which is nice. We've got some dominant, we've got predominantly influencing, steady, and conscientious. And so given your work and your roles and your jobs, you know, it might be interesting to look and see if that has anything to do with maybe perhaps why influencing style, that there's a lot on the, or just perhaps just on this call. So we'll have a good discussion about that. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll here and we'll just keep moving through. So the DISC model, so it looks like everyone was able to take it. And what it's made up of is really a continuum. And so we'll kind of go back to your grade school science here and these looking at a chart. So we have two areas that DISC really focuses on. And if you take nothing away, these two areas are really great pointers to familiarize yourself with the style. So one pointer is pace. So we'll look at those 4 different styles and what the pace looks like. For a couple of the styles, it's a faster pace, and for some of the styles, the pace is more deliberate. And I'm seeing in the chat, yes, Richard says that the style adjusts depending on the situation. And absolutely, ask a question. Come off mute and ask your question throughout this whole session. We want interaction.
Okay, so Karen, it's Richard. The polling was what is your what's your prevalent DISC style, right?
Correct.
So that's how I answered the poll, but I based my style on the situation and on the staff that I'm discussing something with.
That's great. Yeah, so you're a step ahead.
Adapt.
Yep, you're really a step ahead. So one point is the awareness of, okay, this is my, we say default. You know, this is kind of the natural way that I respond, but you're right on in that we adapt, right? Because we need to, and we'll talk about that. The more we're aware, not only of our own style, but other people's styles, really, you know, our responsibility as leaders is to try to adapt. So absolutely right. Great point.
And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So does the DISC model align with the EQ, or does it have an influence with that?
Yeah, so they're different. So the DISC style is really like what Teresa went over. We're really talking about communication. So if we really think about, and it'll probably become more clear as we dive in, you know, how many of you, just even in the chat, have taken a different personality test or some type of assessment about your, you know, either how you behave, something like that. I'm going to guess probably a big portion of you have. Is that true? Yes, no, in the chat?
Yes. Hi, Karen. This is Marites.
Yes. Hi,
can you hear me?
Welcome.
Hi. Yes, I have done the colors.
Yep.
And at that time, time of my management career, I was on the red. And throughout the years, I have learned to adjust. And I agree with Richard that on a daily basis, I confront things according to the situation, and there's a lot of situations. So we adjust to the situation itself. So if you need to be dominant at that time, then you can respond to the situation on a dominant style, or if you want to be influencing, or if you want to be, you know, all those 4 styles.
Yes.
So I think that managers have evolved in that they adjust in a situation on a better way of responding to the situation.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And you bring up a great point that we'll talk about and dive into more in coaching, is that, you know, the style of a leader has changed, right? That there is less of a, I'm the leader and telling you what to do, just even culturally, and much more of a, you know, of an adjusting and really tailoring how we are to the people we lead. So really, really great point, Meredith. Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, and for those of you, maybe, you know, you could be newer to this type of a model. You know, the part of it is understanding yourself, your own self-awareness. When we're in person, we'll cover the assessment and really looking at the folks you lead, and maybe, you know, try to consider what their styles might be. So just kind of moving through here, we talked about the pace, and also priority. You know, there's some style, a couple that are more focused on task, and then there's another style that's more focused on the people. So let's take a look here at how it plays out. So again, if there's nothing else that you take from this, you know, just look at these quadrants, and we take a look at the dominant, you know, the red in the top left. We had on the poll, there was dominant. You can see that in that quadrant, that style is really focused on task and moves quickly. And so keeping in mind that that's, you know, going to be a person who's going to show up a certain way. So how many of you on this call would say that you either are a dominant style, you've worked for a dominant style, you know a dominant style? Even in the chat or come off mute, what do you notice about this style? Anyone? How about somebody who
Well,
was a dominant? Yeah, go ahead.
It's Richard. I was the one who answered the dominant one.
Okay. Yeah. And so, what would you say in taking that assessment and looking at this style again, knowing that you flex, knowing that you adjust? What would you say about this style, knowing that maybe that's your default?
Because if there's a goal or a task assigned to me,
yeah,
and I always like to accomplish it or to have it done even before the deadline.
Yep, excellent, well done, and that so really goes with the task.
That's how I work.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Results, results,
it's
results.
The task at hand.
Mm-hmm. Give me the ROI.
Yep. Yep.
Good. And I'm looking in the chat, so it looks like Stephanie mentions difficulty communicating. So is that in reference to the dominant style, Stephanie?
Yes, that's in reference to the dominant style. I just find that they're very task-oriented, and so unfortunately with that, sometimes you don't communicate exactly what has to be done because you look more at the task instead of maybe the steps to get there. And so you know what you want, but you don't communicate it very well.
Yep. And so, and have you worked with a dominant style, or are you a dominant style yourself?
No, I'm very steady.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're hitting on is the task oriented versus the people oriented. Somebody might want to mute themselves. They're on. We're getting some feedback. Someone put us on mute, so I think we're just gonna go ahead.
Somebody put us on hold.
Somebody put you on hold.
On hold, I mean, yeah. We're on hold.
Back to the elevator. We got elevator muted.
I'm trying to mute everybody, but I do want to hear. Okay, so it still doesn't matter even if I. Okay, mute. It didn't work. It didn't help. Oh, I did. Okay.
There we go.
So everyone is muted. I'm sorry about that. What you can do, I do believe that you still can unmute yourself and talk. So this way we just kind of got rid of the elevator music. So, but I'm going to keep going through the chat because this is great feedback here and great interaction. So Mary just mentions that you're in the middle. April mentions, I think the dominant style loses the people aspect. Okay, yeah, so we're you know, again, keeping the accent on the positive, right? That there's challenges with each one of these styles, and there's strengths. And really the purpose of this is to create that awareness. So, so great. So can somebody just test it, like try to take yourself off mute and and say hi just so we can make sure we can still hear from you guys?
Hi.
Okay, great.
There we go. Perfect.
All right, so yeah, so if you do want to speak, go ahead and take yourself off mute. Let's switch over to the other style. We're going to talk about the influential style now. So this is a faster paced as well, but they're more people oriented. And so let's hear from you. A number of you were the influential style. So what can you tell us about from the assessment you took, and what do you think about what rings true in this style for you? And you have to take yourself off mute. We like connect, good. Nicole says we like connecting with people, excellent. And April says, I think influential gets tasks done like the dominant, but they always connect to the people. Absolutely, yeah. And that again goes to that, that faster pace. At the same time, really wanting that relationship element, kind of wanting everyone on board, wanting buy-in from everyone before moving forward. And Nicole agrees, yep. That connection is very important. April mentions, I think the issue is that we may move a little slower paced. Okay, yep. So did you want to come off mute and maybe talk about that? Do you mean slower paced for maybe someone who's a dominant?
Yeah, I think like, so when you're looking at, you know, we're a little bit slower because we want to get people's feedback into it to be successful. So like, when you're working through a project, I think to be successful, you have to engage your frontline team members who are doing the task, because they're the ones who are going to be helping you get the task done. So it may take a little bit longer for us than somebody who is much more task oriented.
Yep. Yep. Excellent point. Yeah. And I think that that's true, you know, to be able to say, you know, that it's worth it for the influencing style to really want everyone on board. And maybe somebody who's dominant, they see the value, but there's more value in getting the task done and completed. And what's the return on investment? So well said.
And also note around the deliberate, because something that does then start to get a little sacrificed sometimes is being mindful of the level of detail, and that on this side of the continuum, when you start looking at pace and deliberate, also recognizing that moving fast and getting everyone involved, there may be a tendency to overlook some of the data points and some of the actual minutia. So it's one thing to be mindful of. So all the best things in the world can be used as an advantage, but sometimes it's a little bit of a disadvantage if you don't take into consideration what might I be overlooking, because it's not normal, that's not what I default to and traditionally think of.
Great, thank you. And April says, I think the issue is that I think that, yeah, that is why we have to be fluid and dynamic as leaders. Absolutely right, absolutely right. And just sort of piggybacking off of that, the far bottom left, we have the conscientious style. And so again, that deliberate pace, and as we mentioned earlier, this one is really into the details. So really into the facts, really into making sure that everything is perfect, perhaps before making a decision. And also very task oriented. So this is somebody who can work with, you know, just a lot of data and really dig in deep and take the time to review and to make sure that things are accurate before making a decision. For those of you who are conscientious, what could be something that that could be sort of a strength of that, and something that perhaps could be maybe a stumbling block for somebody who's a conscientious type? And we have a few of you said that that was your style.
They're conscientious and they're deliberate. The pace is a little bit slower, so you have to give them a little more time.
A little more time to respond. and maybe not as people oriented, right? So yeah. Excellent. So it can be too slow to get tasks done. Yeah, for other people, right? But for a conscientious, this is, you know, this is the right speed because of the detail and the need to be accurate. So Again, it's just more self-awareness and awareness of others. And maybe if somebody, you know, is a little bit, you know, slower, it's, you know, none of this has anything to do with intelligence. This has to do with a preference and a need to perhaps dig a little bit deeper into the details. And maybe work alone. You know, maybe these are your folks who are going to be a little bit more isolated and less likely to kind of reach out, just as a default. Not that they don't value others' opinion, but it may not be their first go-to. Their first go-to may be more facts. So, okay, good. The last style that we'll cover and take a look at is the steady style. I think, Nicole, you said that you were this style. This is the style that's, again, more deliberate, so a little bit more process-oriented, thoughtful in moving forward, but also people-oriented. So these are folks who, they like to dive deep in relationships. They like to get to know you, like you to get to know them. It gives a level of comfort. You know, these people, you know, these folks like guarantees, you know, like things to be steady. You know, let's not rock the boat. They're not your trailblazers, you know, naturally. So those of you who are steady, let's hear from you. What do you think about this style? And if you're conscientious, please also feel free to share. And we'll give you a second to come off mute. I'm going to try to unmute everyone and see if our elevator music went away. It did. This is great. So whomever put us on hold, please don't do that again, because we all heard elevator music. We assumed it was a joke to our opening elevator, but so you're all unmuted. So if you wanted to take yourself off mute, if you muted yourself, please share with us if you're a steady style or a conscientious style, what kind of rings true for you. Was it Stephanie or Nicole? I think one of you mentioned that you might fall into this.
Yeah, this is Stephanie. So I am more of the steady style. I think you have to get buy-in from the people that you work with and people that are around you. So if you remain consistent in your delivery of information or your expectations, to me, it's a better go. Instead of, I look at it to be easier than being dominant, whereas it's a push. If I have buy-in and I remain very consistent with what I'm doing, I find that overall my outcomes are better. Yeah. I'm also part of the influential, so that was my second highest, and so I use both. I normally am not dominant. That is just a very hard way for me to go. So and I just think that steady, if you remain steady, people know what to expect from you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And I think, yeah, again, just going back to, we all have our preferences, and you know, being steady it's very consistent. And so you're absolutely right. People know they can rely on that, right? They know exactly what to expect. It sounds like from your leadership, they know. You know, you probably have processes in place, I would suspect, and hold people to that. There's not going to be a lot of surprises for the folks who you lead. Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And that's, you know, that's absolutely true. I think we'll look at each style now, and we'll take a look at some of the things that ring true for each. And you all tell me what you think about this. But the dominant style, so typically this behavior, we talked about this already, they're focused on results, so very hard driving, you know, very clear. So these decisions, you know, they can make them pretty readily, but they definitely want control. So a good thing, you know, in a way to support them is, well, let me ask you, when you're working with someone who's dominant, how do you work with them with maybe that controlling nature? So how do you come to an agreement with somebody who's very dominant?
Can I answer that question?
Yes, please. As a dominant, I think yes.
So again, I'm not saying that since that's my default that I am not flexible. Again, it depends on situation. But as a dominant, the way you deal with them is you lay the expectation, you lay the ground rules, you follow it, and it doesn't mean that there's no gray zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as there's no violation or frank violation of any policies or any patient safety,
Mm-hmm.
just lay the expectations and make sure that you follow up on it. When you say something, make sure you do it.
Yep. Yep. So that's something that would be advice for somebody working with a dominant style is, boy, they had better follow up. They had better, you know, do what they say they're going to do. Is that what I'm hearing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
that is, because if you tell me that you're going to call me on this day at this time, and that you have this information to give to me as we agreed upon, and you didn't,
yeah,
that is a no-no to a dominant person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I think that integrity for all the styles, but I think that you're right. I completely agree with you, Richard, that for dominant, again, because being very task oriented, and wanting to drive forward and get to that finish line, if you're not meeting those expectations, that's going to be a pretty hard pill for a dominant style to follow. Good point.
Yep.
How about, so for our influencers, if you're trying to influence someone who's dominant, what would you do? Because boy, you know, maybe they've got their own opinion. So how would you? Okay, yeah, April looks like says be clear, concise about your perspective. Yeah, so not a lot of lofty thoughts, but be very, very clear, right? And again, that has to do with that pacing. Really, just give them what they need to know. Anything else?
Do not
Allow
beat around the bush.
Yeah, brilliant. Miranda,
do not beat around the bush.
Oh, what was that? Was that, were you saying something, Richard? Sorry.
So if you're dealing with a dominant person, do not beat around the bush. Tell it.
Don't beat around the bush. Yep. Excellent. Great. And I'm seeing some other great things in the chat. Allow choices. Do not let them overtake the conversation. Clear and concise. Reiterate what expectations are required. I want to go back to Miranda. Could you elaborate a little bit about the choices? I think you had something there. Might be on mute. Dominant leaders are driven by control. If you take away control, you create resistance. That's right. So by giving choices, right, you're giving them control. Perhaps you're controlling the choices, but it's still allowing for them to move within their comfort zone, and then it'll be a win-win. And it looks like Nicole says asking questions about the situation that might challenge their opinion. Yep, but bringing them to reflecting on a different opinion. Yes. I think they like to be challenged for sure. And so a good sort of sparring is never going to, you know, have a dominant person shy away from. So be prepared for that, you know, especially if maybe you're a steady style and it's not your go-to. Maybe, you know, avoiding conflict. But, you know, for the dominant style, that's, they're okay with it. Keeping that in mind. It looks like, yep, dominant leaders are driven by control. Oh, we already said that. Okay. Oh, the trick is to design choices that attain the influence you desire. Yeah, right. It's that sort of, oh, they came up with it. Amazing. But you had given the choices that included it, but they thought it was their idea. Great. The other thing is I'm sure they're aware of that tactic. So
Karen, this is Meredith.
yes.
I just want to add, I mean, I didn't pick the dominant style, although I know that I also have that style. I think leaders have all of the styles.
Agreed.
That Yeah, and we use it when it's necessary,
Yep.
and situationally. And so I think that the dominant leaders, I think they make strong leaders in a matter that they handle stressful situations and heavy workloads.
Yes.
You know, they make
Yes.
decisions quickly,
Yep.
but then people can be intimidated by that.
Mhm.
So it has to be all in moderation, I guess.
Yeah.
We just need to know how to use this model when the time comes, you know, when it's
Absolutely.
necessary to use them.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Good. Great. Let's keep moving. Great ideas and thoughts around the dominant style. Let's look at influencing style. So this, many of you have this style. So these are your big picture thinkers. So really, you know, an ability to see the whole landscape. So again, that's probably why they're not in the details, because they're really processing things at a very high level and able to see everything that's moving. And part of that really helps with their innovation, being able to see how all the pieces, the moving pieces work together, able to come up with a concept and really see it through. Also very fast paced, efficient, you know, they don't like to beat around the bush either. You know, love support for their ideas. That's a lot of what gives them, it's not an ego boost, but it's really what gives them energy, is to kind of have, again, they're influencing. So they've got that people support with them. That's really what helps those bigger ideas move forward. And they take risks. These are the folks who are going to be a little bit more risk averse, a little bit more willing to try new things or even come up with new things, and have the energy for that. So what else would you all say about this style, either those of you who work with this style or who happen to be this style? Does that ring true?
Yes, from April.
Yeah. Are you an influencing style, April? Great. Great. Okay, well, let's keep moving. So let's take a look at the steady style. So again, we talked a little bit about this style. These are your census-seeking folks. You know, pleasant. So again, really wanting, you know, to not rock the boat. Like to say these are your Coke Classic people. So don't change the formula if it's working. You know, and that's where kind of the risk averse. It's not that they don't take risks. It's that they really want to understand why are we changing something that's working, and that sort of feeds back into the process element of their focus, and really stable. So again, as you were mentioning before, that you know you're predictable as a leader, and so if this is your default style, people understand and know exactly what they're getting, and that can be very reassuring for certain people. And also encourages input. I mean, I think that again goes to that people element, really wanting to connect with other people and be grounded, you know, in the environment and have buy-in from everyone. So these are your team players. Yeah. Did someone want to add something? Oh, you were trying to talk, Nicole? Okay. Are you off? Yes. Nicole, go ahead. You wanted to say something about influencers?
Muted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
Oh, okay. I had unmuted myself on my phone, but I think I had to push *6 as well and just realized.
Okay.
That.
Were you talking?
So,
no one was saying anything.
Yeah, and I was like, why is everybody talking over me? And then I realized. So what I was going to say about the influencers is that description rang true to me 100%. But that I think one of the biggest pet peeves of mine is when, because we care about people's opinions and connection with people, but when people talk to everybody else but us,
yep.
And create more drama around the situation, yep. or a false perception, that just like drives me crazy. So I'd rather people just be honest and direct and come talk to me.
Yeah, excellent. Very, very well said. And I think that is true. Certainly, I feel like we all feel that way. But I would agree that that desire to influence and that desire to connect with people for that influencing style is something that and when we talk about coaching this particular style, a lot of helpful coaching is it's not personal. It's not personal for any style, but for the influencing style in particular, because again, the relationships are so important, is that, not to take things as a personal attack when, perhaps there's disagreement or things like that, can be difficult for an influencing style because you want so much to be on the same page and influence. So I love that. And I think that's a best practice for everyone, is sort of if there's something that's an issue, to bring it right to the person, rather than the kind of, going around and talking to everyone else, and how damaging that and, that gossip and that can be. And that's great, because that's that style, because it's, it touches you in that way. That's something that you can really stand up to. Whereas maybe one of the other styles, it's not as important. So great point. All right, we have one more style. We'll talk about the conscientious style here. So we, talked about this style, and I would still love to hear from someone on the line who is this style or who works with someone who is this style. But again, really being able to go into the details, really being able to solve those complex issues. And part of that is being able to take that time. It has to do with that very deliberate speed of, let me just go in my office, shut the door, and dig through all of the data points before I make a decision. Whereas perhaps maybe one of the other styles doesn't have the patience or doesn't naturally get energy from that. This style really gets energy from being able to dig into information and make decisions. So what do you think? Those of you who work with this style or who are this style, is that ring true? Do you have folks on your team who are like this? The perfectionist, perhaps, the detail, just the facts type folks? Well, we work for one. So we have our CHRO here in Health and Human Resources is this particular style. And boy, I can tell you, that need for accuracy, that desire, that preference for things being very, very accurate, certainly rings true in that preference.
And absolutely, I want to tap into that too. It's about then being able to quickly navigate. But once that person has that clarity, then they can move into action and take on more of the D style or the I style. It's not as though this prevents them from doing so, but you got to give them that time and space in order to be confident with, all right, I've done this analysis, I've come to a conclusion, now I can move.
Yeah. Whereas perhaps someone who's a D, they're going to
move
quickly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then go, oh yeah. So in this, guys, why does it matter, knowing that no style is better, but why do you think it's important to value each of these different styles? Why do we need every style? Why do you think?
Like Miranda's recognition that if you have a really strong style and preference, and maybe you haven't exercised and built up another muscle, it's really great to have another counterpart or leader who has a different style and different approach and preference, that you can partner and work together. We use each other as sounding boards to make certain, what have I missed? What are your thoughts before I engage? So it's an opportunity to leverage people that have the different strengths and skills.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
For me, knowing these other types of styles, it's understanding how they work, and so my expectations will be completely different. Like, for example, understanding that the study person is a more slower, data-driven, detail-driven person, I might not expect something from them in the same amount of time as a dominant.
Yeah, perfect. Yep. Well said. Yeah, and that comes to, you know, being able to understand not only ourselves, and, you know, being able to understand our team and the people we lead.
And just to reiterate as well, as Richard was saying, and many of you have already articulated, we do behave with the different styles at different days and different situations. So it's really important that, oh, I think Joe normally comes from a place of being steady, and so I'm expecting that. Well, you have to stay open, because at any given day there might be some other behavior that's exhibited, which may not be solely in that traditional steady behavior realm. So making sure we don't put people in boxes and inadvertently put a label across their forehead, and just be open to whatever behavior we see and know where it's coming from.
And I think someone said it earlier that we all have elements of all of these styles. This is more just the more aware we are. You know, we're all, and it goes back to the folks who came up with this theory, that we tend to have a default where we kind of fall into these different areas. However, we've all been around long enough, we're in leadership positions, we absolutely have learned to adapt. You know, and the more we're aware of this ourselves and aware of others, the more we can continue to adapt. So good. Okay, so let's take a look here at the stressor style. So this is just kind of a fun, perhaps truth to think about.
No one on the call is going through any stress.
None. Your lives are simple. Your jobs are easy. So if you see these, you know, the stressor style, no, again, it's not personal, but this, you know, they may be out of their element, right? So somebody who's a dominant style, if they start getting bossy, it might be because the speed isn't fast enough, or it may be because they're, you know, the ROI isn't being given to them. So if you see them kind of come across that way, know that they're stressed. Same with the influencing. And again, that, you know, that passion that they have, that desire to innovate and create and have new things happening and wanting to influence, if they're being stressed and maybe they're not being heard, they're going to become a little bit argumentative. Steady, again, wanting things to stay and wanting the process to be followed, they might just dig their heels in a little bit. The conscientious, if they're, you know, perhaps feeling overwhelmed with, you know, the social interaction or a lot of different viewpoints that are just kind of thoughts and theories, but nothing tangible, no data points, they might just kind of shut out and become a little detached. So just a kind of a fun slide, but to think about that we, you know, when we're pushed, we have, you know, some certain reactions. So so this is really, I just wanted to pull this one up. I know we're getting to the end of our time here, but when we're in person, this is really a precursor to when we're in person next week. We're going to revisit this, but I want us to start thinking about not only our own style, that's really what this session was about, and how we show up as these styles, but really, how are we going to start adapting? And we've talked about this. You know, started the conversation, which is wonderful. None of this is completely new to any of us, but really to think about how are you adapting your communication when working with each other and working with your teams. And when we're in person, we'll talk about really how to start coaching to different styles. Okay, so as we mentioned, we'll send this out. We're not going to dive real deep into these, but these are just some great takeaways of how to work with the different styles. So something that we want you to think about, we're not going to dive into it, but just think about what you learned today and start to think about how you're going to adapt to the folks on your team, and be keeping that in mind. So when we meet next week, you've got a sense of how you're going to start to, you know, maybe if you're an influencing style, maybe, you know, slow the pace down a little bit to the point earlier when working with somebody, and change your expectations when perhaps you're working with somebody who's a more conscientious or steady style.
Yeah, especially when you're interpreting someone's behavior and instead of jumping to a conclusion, go, oh, wait a second, maybe this is what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, good. Okay. All right, so glad to see in the chat. So again, this is how to coach to each style. We will be digging into this when we're in person. So how to coach to each style, again, be putting in your back pocket your teams and come with that in mind. And we'll go ahead and be closing out the session. One really fun thing, I'm seeing some great energy in the chat. We love this. Yes, and we are building a cohort. We do have a fun video for you just to give you a trailer of what's going to happen when we're in person next week, and to give you energy when you realize that it's a Friday and you're going to be here at 8 a.m. So we promise that it'll be worth your attendance. So let's take a look here. We've got a fun trailer. Hopefully it'll load. For you to take with you on your Friday. Can you guys see that? All right, so that concludes our session today. Just excited. Thank you for your attendance today. Thank you for your engagement. It's obviously a great group. Oh, I think my YouTube is still playing. Sorry. All right, trying to close down my YouTube here.
Well, the end of the session, it's a Friday. Things happen. We'll go with the flow here. Thank you, person.
So good.
On the couch.
Technology is the best. At least I can mute. Yeah, so
have a great weekend, everybody.
We're
looking forward to seeing you in person. Thank you for being here today.
But one thing I did want to ask, just want to make sure that everyone gets credit for being on the call. Is Angel Martinez on the call? Is Monica Nestling on the call? Charles Hutchinson? Wilmer Flores?
I'm here.
Awesome. And Felleros Casidas Delore. Monica, okay, great. Yep. If I didn't call your name, we already got you from the chat. And we'll make sure to reach out to the folks who didn't make it on the call. But it looks like a really great cohort. I'm excited to meet you all in person. Okay, great. Have a great weekend. Bye. Oh, duh.